Good morning and a warm welcome. Rose Jacobs with you, and you're watching Kalkine TV live from Sydney. This is the Global Markets Roundup, and in today's show we'll explore the latest updates from the equity, currency and commodity markets from across the globe. I have US, Europe and Asian market reports to share with you, and I'll also share some of the latest updates from the Australian market, and we'll discuss how the market is going to look today. So stay tuned. For now, let's take a look at the US market performance. From yesterday's closing, global stock markets strengthened on Tuesday, hovering close to record highs, while the US Treasury yields rose to their highest levels since mid-July, spurred on by the Federal Reserve tapering talk. MSCI's gauge of stocks across the globe gained 0.12%, trading just off the record high it hit last week. Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 index closed at all-time highs on Tuesday, August the 10th, as investors laid bets on economy-sensitive stocks amid excitement over the US $1 trillion infrastructure spending bill that was passed by the US Senate in a bipartisan vote. Looking now at the US market performance in numbers, the S&P 500 was up 0.10%, the Dow Jones gained 0.46%, the tech-heavy Nasdaq composite fell 0.49%, and the small-cap Russell 2000 was up 0.20%. The infra bill passed in a 69-30 vote, and that will pave the way for the US government to allocate critical resources for building roads, bridges, railways and other infrastructure projects. Lawyers from both sides of the political divide had debated the bill for several weeks. Meantime, the US government said that COVID hospitalisation cases rose to a 6-month high over the weekend, with around 100,000 infections reported on average for 3 consecutive days. The grim COVID outlook may have dampened the spirits of the growth stock investors. The tech-heavy Nasdaq saw a lacklustre session amid the latest COVID update. Energy and industrial stocks were the top movers on the S&P 500 index, whose 7 of the 11 segments stayed in the green zone. Technology and communication stocks declined. Let's take a look at these two newsmakers. Meme stock AMC Entertainment fell 5.86% in intra-day trading, despite a strong second quarter earnings report on Tuesday. Its revenue for the June quarter surged 2,253% year on year to US $444.7 million, much above Wall Street's expectations. Next, a transportation and mining giant in Canada, Canadian Pacific Railway, said that it raised its offer for US rail company Kansas City Southern by US $2 billion to US $27 billion. However, the value is still lower than its rival Canadian National Railway's offer of US $29 billion. Canadian Pacific Railway stock fell by 0.80%, while Kansas City Southern surged by 7.39% after the news. In the crypto world, stocks of Coinbase Global declined 3.5%, Bitcoin plunged to 1.82%, and Ethereum declined to 0.85%. Moving to futures and commodities, gold futures were up 0.19%, silver increased by 0.23%, while copper rose 1.36%. Brent oil futures increased by 0.04% and WTI crude was up 3.04%. Moving to the bond market, the 30-year Treasury bond yields rose 2.07%, while the 10-year bond yields rose 2.82%. This is how the US markets performed. It's time for a short break, but when we return, we'll look at the stock markets in Europe and Asia. Stay tuned to Kalkine TV.
Hi, I'm Sage, and get ready to take the crypto ride with me on Kalkine TV. Watch the Crypto Buzz every Tuesday and join the excitement at Kalkine TV. From Bitcoins to NFTs to Dogecoin and DeFi, we have updates about everything around these digital currencies. Understand the investing rationale and the risks involved in the space with me, Sage, on Crypto Buzz. Keep watching Kalkine TV.
Welcome back. I'm Rose Jacobs and you're watching Kalkine TV live from Sydney. This is the Global Markets Roundup show. Let's now look at the Europe and Asia share market performance. European stocks hit record highs on Tuesday, extending gains for a seventh straight session as investors took comfort from strong earnings reports and economic recovery prospects, and that's despite concerns about the Delta variant of COVID-19. The Pan-European STOXX 600 index gained 0.4% to notch an all-time high. The London markets traded in a green zone as investors digested the latest UK retail sales data. According to the data from the British Retail Consortium, UK retail sales increased by around 6.4% during July from a year ago. FTSE 100 listed Flutter Entertainment shares combined with the Irish bookmaking holding company had reported a significant growth in the adjusted earnings during the first half, benefited by the acquisition of Stars in the US. Next, hospitality company Intercontinental Hotels had swung into profit during the first half. The company recovered from the adverse impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the shares slipped by around 0.31%. Moving on now to news from Germany. Government bond yields in Germany, the Eurozone's benchmark bond issuer, held above recent six-month lows on Tuesday as that talk in the US. Federal Reserve could soon discuss tapering its bond buying stimulus and has kept bond market bulls in check for now. Germany's benchmark 10-year bond yield was a touch lower at 0.46%. It briefly hit its highest in just over a week at 0.447% as 10-year US Treasury yields rose to their highest in more than 3 weeks. And now a look at the Asia market. Japanese stocks ended higher on Tuesday as corporate earnings continued to impress, but gains were limited by worries about the fast-spreading Delta coronavirus variant. The Nikkei share average ended the day at 0.24%. Yields on Japanese government bonds rose on Tuesday, tracking US Treasuries as a strong labour market recovery spurred bets for a near-term tightening of monetary policy. The 10-year JGB yield rose 1 basis point to 0.020%. A bounce back in liquor makers helped China's main stock indexes rebound from early falls on Tuesday, despite a resurgence of coronavirus infections weighing on investor sentiment. The blue chip CSI 300 index gained 1.2%, while the Shanghai Composite Index gained 1%. South Korean shares ended lower on Tuesday, dragged down by persistent worries about the spread of the Delta variant and more talks of stimulus withdrawal by the US Federal Reserve. The Kospi dropped 17.23 points or 0.53% at 3,243.19, extending losses to a fourth session. That's how the markets performed in Europe and Asia. It's time for a short break, but after the break, we'll look at the stock market in Australia. So stay tuned to Kalkine TV.
Hi there, James Preston for Kalkine TV. Are you into gaming and virtual reality? Does AI and the endless possibilities it entails capture your interest? Or are you constantly trawling through the web to try and discover the latest updates and innovations in the tech space? Well, let us do the work for you. From the latest product launches to shocking affairs on the World Wide Web, exclusive interviews and information about the top companies like Apple and Google to brand new tech startups vying for your attention. Kalkine's Tech Beat has the latest in what matters in the world of technology. Join me every single Monday on the Tech Beat, exclusive to Kalkine TV.
Welcome back. I'm Rose Jacobs and you're watching Kalkine TV live from Sydney. This is the Global Markets Roundup show. Let's look at the Australian share market performance. Today's share market is on the higher side, tracking positive cues from Wall Street. Higher oil prices are expected to lift domestic energy stocks in intra-day trade. The ASX 200 closed at 0.3% higher at record points on Tuesday. Energy stocks such as Woodside Petroleum and Santos could trade higher today. After a recent steep sell-off, gold prices rose on Tuesday despite a rally in the dollar, and bond yields continued to hold the market. Spot gold rose 0.1% while US gold futures ended up 0.3%. ASX listed gold stocks such as Northern Star Resources and Newcrest Mining could trade higher today also. Dalian iron ore was under pressure due to weakening Chinese demand and fell for a fifth straight session on Tuesday to hit a more than 4-month low. The most traded iron ore for January 2022 delivery on China's Dalian Commodity Exchange ended 1.3% lower. Benchmark copper on the London Metal Exchange was up 1.7%, and that's the latest for now. Stay tuned with Kalkine TV for more live market updates. We'll be back with more news on markets, economy and diverse themes and sector.